This is a screencast to try to explain a little bit about the workload modeling system that I've been developing in the School of Engineering at Ulster University. As you can see here, I've populated the system with some test data just to let us see what's going on. You might see there's one odd one out, and that's because the workload allocation system is designed to have complete transparency within a particular peer group. Generally speaking, all of the information within the system is divided into things called work packages. Work packages are collections of staff over a particular period of time, and really the most likely way you're going to use this is for a particular school or department over an academic year. You could do it in other ways, but this is probably the most normal use case. It also allows you to drop back into previous year's packages to see what previous allocations look like and how you might want to track longitudinal changes. Within a particular work package, you can divide staff up into as many groups as you want. In this case, it's very simple. Everybody is just in this one group. You could have distinct groups inside this work package, or you could take some of these folks out and put them in an additional group. If you do that, this particular screen will show each group with its statistics underneath it. As you can see at the minute, this particular group of staff is showing us having no workload allocated at the minute. Everything is down at zeros. That's because we haven't added anything into the system. Also, you might notice at the minute this is showing percentages. You have a choice between whether you want the system to show percentages or hours, and that can be configured by individual work package. Generally speaking, one of the most important parts of work that people want to allocate initially is teaching. And in this particular case, we've put this under modules, and we will see there's a number of modules that have been added in this test data set. You can click into these to have a little bit of a look in more detail. You'll notice that within the module information, there's some information about the module credits, a little bit of information about the module size, the semester in which the module runs, and the number of hours. In this case, I have allowed quite a lot of the information to be calculated automatically by the system. If you specify precise information for a module in terms of its contact hours, its admin hours, and its assessment hours, those will be exactly what you specify them to be. Otherwise, this system will try to make its best guess based on how you've configured it and how your particular workload model works. It's important to remember this system does not dictate a workload model, it's designed to facilitate your choice of workload model. So you can see here there's a certain number of hours associated with this particular module, and my test system has actually specified some particular people as module coordinator and the moderator. You can go right in here now and say who's teaching on this module. Well, Tony is apparently the module coordinator, so I guess we should probably give him some work on this. You might decide that Tony is on this for 50% of the time, and as you can see, you can divide the time up differently between contact, admin, and how much time people are spending on assessment. Who shall we get to help Tony? Maybe Pepper. So in this particular case, this is 50-50. You might want to say, well, actually, Tony's the module coordinator, so actually he has the lion's share of the admin. Let's make that 60 and accept the fact that Pepper is definitely doing some admin nevertheless, and that they're sort of splitting the assessment between themselves. And then you'll be able to see within this particular module the staff allocation. And we can go down through the modules in this way. Another way to view this, by the way, is to go to loads and go to loads by modules, in which case we will see how this is starting to look in terms of what we've allocated to various modules. And you'll see at the top this particular first module has been allocated. All of these numbers are in red, showing a potential problem. In this case, there is apparently a module with no allocation. And again, you can use this as a point to dive in and have a look at that. So apparently Charles Xavier is the module coordinator this time. Let's say Charlie is working on this entirely on his own. So we're going to just continue to add some workload into the system in this way. And when we go into the loads window, we'll begin to see that some of this is starting to appear. It's reasonably light at the minute, probably because of the way the sizes of the modules. But we can see Tony's got some load in the second semester, as does Pepper, and Charles has got some load in the third semester. My script has randomly allocated these modules into various semesters. So you can see part of the system is designed to help you track the way in which staff are loaded, not just across an academic year, but to try to see bunching points across a particular semester. There's a lot more we could do with that, but you can add these individual tasks for teaching, and of course if you went through all of these modules, you'd start to see these staff load up quite substantially in time. You can go into a particular individual like Tony and see precisely how this loading is divided up to him so far. But what if you want to add some other type of activity? Maybe you want to add research into this system, and there's a couple of different ways you can do this. One of them is to add things into projects. Now projects allow you to create essentially things not unlike research grants where a number of staff are working on a particular period of time. At the minute I haven't built a nice integrated admin feature for adding projects, but there is an admin interface down in the bottom right that allows you access to other more complicated administration. I'm trying to largely get rid of this need to make life a little bit simpler, but let's add a project for now. So we're going to add a test grant. Whoops. And we're going to say it started, let's say on the 1st of 2018, and it's going to stop at the very end of 2020. Now there's no bodies for here, so I'll need to go and do that first of all. You'll unfortunately only see part of this window. I'm sorry about that, but this allows you to add a grant awarding body, which I've just done. So I'm just saying this might be the EPSRC, and you can specify what type of activity it is. Let's say that's a research grant. So now I've added this project into the system. I can go into projects and you can see it's in here, and I can say, well, who's working on this grant? And I can say, well, you know, it's our friend here. Now in this case, let's just say that this person is working on the grant from the start. It may not be the case until the end. And let's say that there's a 7-hour per week allocation there. And let's say Selena is working on this as well. This allows you to add information in a very granular way, but it may be a bit much for a lot of people. You submit all of that, and then you can generate some activities out of this. When we go back into the loads, with a bit of luck, we can see Selena there now has some significant loading across all 3 semesters, and so does Wolverine up here. So fundamentally, when you go into the admin interface, it works out roughly what percentage should be allocated by some assumptions that you have in the work package. You can tweak a lot of the assumptions that are used behind that. So this is a way in which, if you want, you can specify very, very granular information about how people are working. However, you might decide that you would prefer to allocate a flat 40% to all your members of staff for research. Now, you can do this by going into the activities and adding an individual activity into each member of staff, but that's pretty tedious. So there is a feature called generators that can help with this. And again, the generators aren't entirely within this interface. You have to go into the admin interface. But you can go to an activity generator and say, right, okay, flat research allocation. And you might say that you're going to allocate, let's say, 30% for the sake of argument. So you have a choice between allocating hours or percentages in these things, but I'm going to go for percentage. I'm going to say that this represents a workload over all 3 semesters. And in activity type here, well, we're going to say under research grants. It's probably, we could have added another activity type here. This is whether the activity is associated with a module. In this case, it really isn't. An optional comment and the work package, but this is the one we're working in. So this is a flat allocation, and you have a choice here between allocating this to a bunch of individuals by picking them individually, or you can allocate it to an entire group, and I'm going to be lazy and do that. Now that has some potential problems, which we'll see in a moment. So that creates an activity generator, as it's called. We can now access this here, and we can run it, and it will create activities for all the people involved, and we'll see all of a sudden a lot of workloads have spiked substantially. Some of them very much so. If we look at Scott here, for instance, we can see that he only has 30% total, but over here it's suddenly 75%. And the reason why is my test system has generated some of these staff to be part-time. So this is showing their loads as a sort of absolute, but this is scaling it to what it would look like as a single FTE. So actually in this particular run, I'm just noticing this surprisingly large number of part-time staff. There we go. But you can begin to sort of go, all right, that was a bit ill-advised. So you might want to go to Scott and say, well, yeah, okay, that's too much. So you can go into activities where these particular activities have been created, and you can go and tweak Scott. You can say, well, yeah, for Scott, that's just too much. So I'm going to take that to 20. And when we go back to his low, we'll see that that's come down to a more manageable level. So you have a choice between adding everything individually or sort of adding it on bulk and then making individual tweaks. In terms of the other contributions that members of staff make, which can be very important, which are, for example, whether you're a course director or a head of department, you might want to be able to put all of that kind of material in. Again, you can do that whatever way you want. You can go into activities here, and you can say that you're going to make somebody a course director, and you're recognizing the amount of time that they're spending in that role. And the amount of time you might give them might depend very much on the size of the course and the nature of support mechanisms in your semester. Again, course directing, I think, is largely a year-round activity. So let's put this one under teaching administration. These activity types you can add whatever you like. Let's make Bruce course director, because he seemed like he might have had some time to do that on the loads page. We can see Bruce has got that now against his allocation. When we come into activities, we can see that we're adding all of these things in. So you can continue doing this by whatever means. You can add all your module teaching allocations, and when we go back into loads by modules, we can see precisely what's allocated. We can, by the way, say, let's have a look at the brief details, and we can get a complete breakdown of who's teaching. I use this to be able to hand this to folks that are helping with timetabling, because they can then see what contributions various members of staff are making to modules. And we can see that, okay, there's red issues here. We need to allocate these other modules. So this gives a bit of an overview of the main workload allocation aspects of the system, which is the primary purpose of this. But there are lots of other things you could choose to do. As I've mentioned, you can choose to divide these staff up into more groups. You can see at the bottom of the groups, it's very quick how much the hours rack up, and we can see what the average number of hours are looking like in this particular group. So if you wished, you could take the part-time staff out and put them in another group underneath, and that would be useful in comparing whether the workload assumptions were sort of equitable between these different types of cohorts. The goal, of course, if you're using percentages or hours, isn't really to get to 100% workload. It's to get to a meaningful sort of margin that sort of reflects people's activities. So that's by looking at the loads by staff, the loads by modules. You can go into the activities. We can also, for example, add an activity like the health and safety coordinator, if I could type. We can say, well, we reckon that's going to take 100 hours over the year, and that's under health and safety, and we don't know who that is yet, so we'll just hit submit. And you'll see on the activities that just shows as a not allocated activity. So obviously that doesn't change the loads, but you could then go through and have a conversation with your staff and say, who would be able to maybe contribute to that and who would enjoy taking that task on. And okay, we might look at let's see. Well, Clark here. Clark maybe has some time to do this, so we can go back into the activities task and take this, and there he is. And then when we go back into the loads, we can see this assumption. So again, this is a workload modeling system where the assumptions are completely transparent, but only within a peer group. People who are not inside this group will not have access to this information and really not be able to see it at all. So I hope that's a bit helpful. I'm going to have a look in a moment at some other features that the system has in a separate video, just to point out that you can now also, this help tab just opens up the wiki for the system in another tab, so it might be able to give some help on how you should go about doing some of these activities, and hopefully that will be very helpful. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm just going to stop the recording there.